Why do so many people remain stuck in the same place, even when they're doing everything right? You meditate, visualize, express gratitude, and nothing changes. Do you know why? Because the universe doesn't respond to your effort. It responds to your vibration. And if you're trying too hard, you're already disconnected. The truth that few have the courage to admit is simple. Insistence blocks the flow. The more you force, the further you drift. The more you chase, the more life slips through your fingers. Because abundance isn't conquered. It's allowed. And it only arrives when you stop negotiating with time and start listening to what the soul has been trying to whisper for years. You were convinced to fight to have value, but you forgot something essential. What is natural flows. What is yours aligns. What is true doesn't require sacrificing your essence. In this video, you'll understand why your search isn't working. You'll realize that everything that seems to go wrong might be exactly what can set you free. And when this is truly understood, the effort will cease, and the flow will begin. But you need to stay until the end, because only at the end will everything make sense. When we look around, what we see is humanity running to reach goals, standards, results. The body still rests in the chair, but the mind is already on the next challenge, the next obligation, on what's missing, not on what exists. This constant movement, this internalized state of urgency, isn't part of the natural human essence. It's programming, one that, little by little, disconnects us from the only frequency where true abundance can be accessed, the now. In nature, nothing is in a hurry. The tree doesn't rush to bear fruit. The river doesn't worry about running faster to reach the sea. There's a rhythm, an internal timing that governs each manifestation of life, and this timing, which we call natural cycles, is being ignored by a society that only values doing. It's in this disconnection that scarcity is born. Over time, we've been conditioned to measure value by productivity. If you're not creating, if you're not generating, if you're not producing, then you're failing. But this logic only makes sense for machines. The human being is cyclical by nature, and abundance isn't a result of speed, but of presence. When this center is lost, contact with the field of infinite possibilities that exists when one is whole in the now is also lost. Those who live chasing don't listen, and the universe only speaks to those who listen. That's why many feel they ask, visualize, affirm, but nothing changes. Because it's not about shouting your desires to the universe, it's about tuning into it. The universe responds to the frequency of presence, not to the vibration of pressure. While there's tension in the chest and demands in the mind, the flow of abundance retracts, not as punishment but due to disharmony. We live in an era where internal time has been hijacked. Phone notifications dictate the rhythm, the calendar piles up obligations, and the body, ignored, is just pushed to endure a little more. This makes us lose something subtle but essential, the listening of the soul. And without this listening, we're carried by a river that isn't ours. Without direction, without real purpose, just moved by fear of falling behind. Spirituality isn't a distant concept. It begins when you stop. When you breathe without hurry, when you observe without judging, and in that small space between stimulus and response, there's a portal, the entrance back to your own time, to the rhythm of your spirit, to your point of power. And that's where abundance begins to reveal itself, not as a future promise, but as an internal state that was already available, it just needed to be accessed. But there's something even deeper to be understood, a silent dimension of prosperity that manifests even when nothing around seems to flourish. The collective mind has conditioned us to believe that abundance is measured with numbers, properties, performance, as if the fullness of existence could fit inside spreadsheet. But this illusion only sustains itself when the focus is outward, because just one moment of true presence is enough to realize. Scarcity begins where connection with oneself ends. There are moments when nothing moves externally, and that's where many get lost. They believe they're failing, that they're late, that they've lost something. But not everything that seems still is stagnant. The absence of visible results doesn't mean absence of transformation. The universe doesn't operate under the logic of immediacy. It reveals itself in the vibration you sustain in silence, away from performance, away from the showcase. This is where the idea of abundance gains another layer. It's not in the arrival. It's in the internal space that opens while walking. It's not about achievements, it's about coherence. It's what you feel when you don't need applause to validate your existence. When your own company is enough. When you honor your truth even on days when it doesn't generate likes or profit. Even in what they call inertia, there's growth. Patience grows. Listening grows. Grounding grows. There's wisdom being built in the silence of non-productive phases. But only those who stop measuring value with their eyes and start feeling with the soul see this. The ego feeds on evidence. Consciousness feeds on presence. There's no greater prosperity than being at peace with who you are, than not violating yourself to fit into the world's deadlines. When internal peace replaces external comparison, abundance settles in. Because true abundance isn't about having everything. It's about not feeling the lack of yourself. And when this feeling of completeness blooms inside, even when the outside world says everything is stuck, something changes. Not from outside in, but in the subtle field where the universe begins to respond to this internal state. And from there, everything begins to reorganize itself. There's a detail that escapes most people when going through difficult moments, how fertile these moments are. But not fertile in the traditional sense, where everything blooms and expands before the eyes. Fertile in the invisible sense, where what's being cultivated can't be seen yet. It's being felt, absorbed, assimilated by the soul. Scarcity, in these moments, is just the external language that reveals an internal reorganization. When life takes back what we believed we had conquered, it's, many times, returning the freedom we lost in attachment. The end of a relationship, unexpected job loss, the debt that tightens, all of this are portals. Not punishments, not penalties, portals. Invitations to review the route, to recover parts that had been forgotten, to see what can only be perceived when external structures collapse. These periods, which at first glance seem like loss, carry a raw opportunity to approach what is real. When everything that sustained you from the outside disappears, what remains is who you really are. And this revelation, however uncomfortable it may be, is always a liberation. Scarcity, lived with awareness, is a teacher. It reveals the dependence we've created on certainties, on control, on recognition. It shows where we projected our value. And at the same time, it offers a unique chance to dissolve these bonds. Because when there's nowhere left to lean on outside, we're led, almost by force, inward. And that's where the alchemy begins. That's why so many accounts of spiritual awakening are born from chaos. Because chaos is a calling. It disorganizes what was false to make room for what is true. Only the world wasn't taught to see it this way. It was taught to fear the fall, to resist loss, to deny the void. But the void is fertile. Loss is intelligent. And the fall is often the only way to touch the ground of one's own essence again. Everything that's taken away abruptly usually carries an unheard message. And when the message is finally understood, what seemed like an ending transforms into a beginning. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes function. It stops being punishment and becomes revelation. And it's precisely there that abundance begins to infiltrate discreetly through the cracks opened by vulnerability. But the modern world doesn't like vulnerability. It forces constant haste, and this urgency can cause these profound lessons to go unnoticed. Part of the challenge in accessing a more meaningful life lies in the fact that urgency has been normalized, not as an exception, but as a rule. People wake up already in debt to time, pressured by an invisible timer that never turns off. This sense of permanent rush isn't natural, it was induced. And the system, which feeds on haste, knows this. The logic of the modern world is simple. Keep the individual busy enough so they don't have time to question why they're running. That's why there's always something new to seek, an unattainable ideal to pursue, a success standard that moves away each time it seems close. The system was designed this way, so that no one arrives, but everyone keeps trying. This imposed urgency isn't just a habit, it's a strategy. While running, one doesn't listen. While comparing, one doesn't feel. And while producing nonstop, one doesn't notice how much of their own energy is being diverted to feed structures that only survive on our disconnection. Failure, in this context, stopped being a human experience and became a manipulation trigger. If you don't have, if you didn't achieve, if you don't perform, then you're behind. And if you're behind, you need to run. That's how dependence is perpetuated, convincing people that they're never enough as they are and that they need something external to complete themselves. But what the system can't control is the rhythm of the soul. That one is sovereign. It doesn't respond to goals, doesn't recognize clocks, doesn't fit into metrics. And when someone starts to hear this rhythm, even in small moments of pause, something begins to break inside. The false begins to dissolve. What seemed urgent loses strength, and what seemed distant begins to approach. Urgency distorts the perception of time. It makes everything seem like it's for now. And when everything is for now, nothing has presence. The human being fragments, divides, exhausts themselves. And in this exhaustion, spiritual sensitivity closes, because it only flourishes where there's space. The soul doesn't reveal itself under pressure, it reveals itself in silence. That's why recovering one's own rhythm isn't a luxury, it's an act of rebellion, a way to reconnect with what truly guides existence. And this return to the internal compass doesn't happen with force. It happens with listening. A listening that begins timidly, but soon reveals something essential. When the mind begins to slow down and the body realigns with its own signals, something subtle happens. The perception of time changes. Not clock time, but the time of existence. And in this clearer, more alive perception, a truth that the modern world tries to forget is revealed. Everything, absolutely everything in life, operates in cycles. Nothing is always blooming. Nothing is always withdrawn. The wisdom lies in knowing how to dance with time and not fight against it. The difficulty lies in the fact that we were taught to only value summer. The days of expansion, the results, the harvest. But nature doesn't work that way. It honors winter with the same reverence it celebrates spring. And we, as part of this same living organism, need to recover this understanding. The cycle of retraction isn't an error, it's an invitation. An invitation to rest, to listen, to digest experiences. But the conditioned mind resists. It wants constant movement, quick response, instant solutions. The problem is that the soul isn't in a hurry. It needs the time of silence to reorganize itself. It needs the dark to germinate new understandings. And if this time is denied, what's born isn't abundance, it's exhaustion. Honoring cycles means not forcing flowers where there are still seed. It's looking at cloudy days with the same reverence as sunny days. It's understanding that the pause isn't an interruption of the journey, but an essential part of it. Without the interval, without the void, without the withdrawal, fullness doesn't sustain itself, because there's no root that can withstand an eternal summer. And when this understanding settles in the body, something dissolves. The guilt for not producing, the shame for not performing, the anxiety to rush processes. All of this gives way to a deeper presence, because now it's understood that each phase has its purpose, its medicine, its beauty. The soul doesn't evolve under pressure. It flourishes in trust. Trust that internal timing knows what it's doing, even when nothing is visible on the outside. And trusting in time is trusting in life. Trusting that even when everything seems still, the invisible is in full motion. But to perceive this, one must be willing to look, not with the eyes, but with feeling. And as this listening expands, the concept of abundance changes shape again. It's curious how, after so much searching, so many paths traveled, what's revealed in the end is almost always the same. True wealth was never on the outside. And this isn't a pretty phrase. It's a realization that's only understood when one crosses through the noise of the mind and reaches that silent place where the soul breathes. Real prosperity isn't measured in possessions. It's measured in presence, in how much peace exists when the world is noisy, in how much freedom is felt even without guarantees, in how much wholeness is carried even in the face of instability. The wealth we speak of here doesn't show itself in numbers. It reveals itself in the way you inhabit the now. Having time for yourself, health to exist, clarity to discern what's worth or not worth your energy, that's abundance. Having a heart that hasn't hardened even after the falls, a mind that remains open even after disappointments, that's worth more than any material achievement. Because everything that's external can be taken away. But what's built inside, no one takes. And that's why so many people who have everything continue feeling a void that can't be filled. Because accumulating on the outside doesn't fill what's missing inside. When connection with essence is lost, the rest becomes performance. But when this connection is restored, even the simple gains brightness. Breathing becomes lighter. Walking has more meaning. Silence stops being uncomfortable and becomes a meeting place. True prosperity doesn't shout, doesn't show off. It reveals itself in small gestures, in moments when you choose not to react, in instants when you feel gratitude without apparent reason. Living with a present heart is more valuable than any security promised by the system, because the only real security is being at peace with who you are. And this peace can't be bought. It's cultivated. It's fed by conscious choices, by true relationships, by well-lived pauses. When you live with presence, even challenges change shape. They're no longer interruptions. They're part of the flow. Everything becomes integrated, absorbed, transformed. In the end, the secret of abundance lies less in doing and more in being. Being whole in each step, in each conversation, in each decision. Because it's in this state of presence that life reveals its sacred aspect. And it's exactly there, where the sacred is touched, that the natural flow of prosperity begins. Now that you understand that abundance can't be forced, what are you still trying to control out of fear of losing? It's time to stop chasing and start living aligned. Not with the ego, but with the silent rhythm of your soul. Because when you stop fighting against the cycles, what's yours begins to arrive effortlessly. So, observe your life with more presence. Question what you're doing out of obligation. Breathe before reacting. And above all, honor even the silence, because that's where the universe speaks loudest. Tell me in the comments, which cycle of your life do you feel you're still resisting? And what are you going to do from now on to let go? If this video made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we continue deepening these truths that liberate one consciousness at a time.